Welcome back, my friends, to the De-Rate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the De-Rate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. In this incredible DTH episode, we are diving into a conversation that epitomizes the transformative power of dialogue. Joining us are two remarkable individuals, absolute icons in the de-radicalization space, and men I am honored to call my friends. Today, I am joined by Daryl Davis and Jeff Schoep, whose initial encounter sparked a journey of de-radicalization and unexpected connection. Their conversation explores the profound impact of genuine dialogue on shifting perceptions and fostering understanding. We'll uncover the organic nature of human connection and the ripple effect of positive change that emanates from it. At the heart of our discussion lies the theme of de-radicalization. We'll delve a bit into Jeff's journey, guided by the unwavering support and insight of Daryl Davis. Their exchange highlights the importance of personal stories and vulnerability in challenging preconceived notions and reshaping one's beliefs. But this isn't just about individual transformation. We'll examine how ongoing conversations and relationships play a pivotal role in changing not only individuals, but entire communities. As perceptions shift, realities transform. Through their dialogue, Daryl and Jeff illuminate the power of conversation in bridging divides and dismantling barriers. Perception shapes reality, and by altering someone's perception, we have the power to change their reality. So join us, my friends, as we journey through the depths of human connection, exploring the profound impact of unexpected encounters, genuine dialogue, and the relentless pursuit of understanding. And with that, my friends, here we go. Daryl Davis and Jeff Schoep. Oh man, my friends, how are you? I've been so much looking forward to this conversation, getting both of you guys on at the same time. The DTH listeners know that you guys have both been here a few different times. We've had a number of conversations, and now I've got both my friends here together. Daryl Davis, Jeff Schoep. How are we today, fellas?
Doing wonderful. Thank you for having us.
Really good. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So I go back in my mind all the way to the first conversations that I had with both of you guys, and I know Jeff, you and I first talked way back in episode 70 on the De-Rate the Hate podcast. I think it was somewhere around, I don't know, end of 2021, August of 2021, I think, and then Daryl, you and I had our first conversation early 2022, back episode 99 was the first time you and I had a conversation. And when I found out, number one, Jeff, in our conversation, I found out from you that Daryl Davis was an instrumental figure, one of the leading figures in your separation from radicalization, right? Your de-radicalization transition. Daryl was a very big part of that, and that story, of him marching in the Cub Scout parade as a young boy, and how that really hit you in the hit your emotional side, and really was part of the genesis of your de-radicalization. And then Daryl, to have you on my show back then and have you tell me that story, that same story, it's one thing to hear it from somebody else, but then it's another to truly hear it right from the source. And then the conversations that we've had since then, I know a bunch of separate conversations. You both have been on the show a few different times, and so truly an honor to have you guys here together to share that story and the beginning of that with the DTH listeners. So thank you so much for that. So, so let's start off with this. Jeff, when did you first, become, obviously at the time you were the leader of the National Socialist Movement here in the United States of America, and you were somebody highly radical back in that stage of your life. But when did you first become familiar with Daryl Davis and the work that Daryl Davis was doing?
I had heard about Daryl Davis, obviously in the movement. He was one of those individuals that, we knew about because he was helping get people out. So he was, dare I say, like the enemy in that sense, because he was pulling people out and getting people out of the movement. So when I was originally called by the filmmaker for Accidental Courtesy about appearing in the film, normally I would do due diligence. I would check up backgrounds, see who I was talking to and all that, whether it was fate, destiny, whatever you want to call it. I didn't do that. I just said, oh, this sounds like a good program. I'll come down there and I'll film with it and I'll do the interview. So I didn't even know I was meeting Daryl. So when he came up, and I'm outside with my girl at the time, and we were sitting there, and he came up and shook hands. He says, you must be Jeff. I'm Daryl Davis. And in my mind, I was like, I know that name and I recognize this guy. Where do I know him from? And it didn't click right away. It was just like, he seems friendly, but I know that name. Where do I know that name from? And I'm thinking. And then by the time we'd went in and sat down, I was like, oh crap, this is the guy that gets people out of hate groups and so on and so forth. So I wasn't ready to necessarily like square off against him, but it was like, this is another day at the office. I'm ready for this, bring it on. And what I didn't realize was, we sat down, we're having this conversation, and it was more like two old friends meeting. And, we were having all this, things in common, and it was just a fascinating conversation. And I realized, oh wait, there's cameras rolling. This is somebody on the other side, so to speak. I better start, buckling down a bit here. And then, that's when I made the comment, which was, it ended up in the film where, it was like, oh, well, I'll fight to the last bullet for my people, because I realized Daryl and I were getting along too well. And this wasn't the narrative that I was trying to spin for the NSM at the time. So, it was a meeting that was life altering. It changed my life, and I'm incredibly grateful that I was able to meet him. But at the time, I just thought, well, I'm going to square off against this guy then, but
sure,
it didn't play out like that.
Right. Yeah. And that is fascinating. I do want to get into that a little bit deeper, Jeff, but Daryl, so then, same thing, when did you first become, now at this point you were already kind of an old hat at working through these types of situations with, whether it be Klan members or other neo-Nazis or just people specifically that were hateful towards towards people that weren't like them, right? I mean, this is something that was kind of your thing at the time. But when did you become familiar with Jeff Schoep, and then what were your thoughts going into that? I mean, obviously, like Jeff said, you just walk up and shake hands just like he's any other guy off the street, which is fascinating in and of itself, right? I mean, most people don't think that that's even a possibility. But when did you become familiar with Jeff Schoep, and then what were your thoughts in that initial meeting?
I'd seen Jeff way back, when he was a lot younger. I'm not sure if he was the leader then or just a member, but I would see him on at least two different TV shows, those talk shows. Mm-hmm. One of them was a show called Rolanda, mm-hmm. and he was there with another of his members. colleagues at the time. And, I sat there watching the show like, what on earth are these guys talking about, And Rolanda is a Black woman. And, she maintained her cool, and she was, cordial, gave them, their space to say what they wanted to say, et cetera, et cetera. And I listened back and forth, to each of them. So that was one of my first familiarities with Jeff. And then I'd heard about him subsequently over the years. He'd have a rally somewhere, out in the West Coast or somewhere else. It'd make the news. And so, oh yeah, that's that guy I saw, on Rolanda. I didn't know him, but I knew who he was. So then during the filming of Accidental Courtesy, the producer or director, they both are brothers, one of them ran across his name in something. I don't know if he'd been on the news or something. And they said, what do you think about us contacting him and seeing if he'll give you an interview? I said, fine. Do you know him? No, I don't know him personally, but yeah, I know who he is. Yeah, go ahead and, if you know how to reach him, go ahead and reach out to him. So they did. And we happened to be in Alabama at the time. And we had gone to the Southern Poverty Law Center and a few other places, the bus stop where Rosa Parks got on the bus and all that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So one of the guys reported back, they'd gotten hold of Mr. Schoep, and he had agreed to come down. He would be coming from Michigan. And so they got it all set up. And Montgomery, Alabama is not only famous for the Rosa Parks incident, but it's also a historic landmark in the musical fabric of our country, particularly country music. Mm-hmm. And the father of country music was born there, a fellow named Hank Williams Sr.
I've heard of him.
Learned how to play from a Black blues guitar player. But anyway, I went and visited Hank Williams' grave and all that kind of thing. And so the way it was set up, they brought me to this place called Chris's Diner or Chris's Hot Dog Stand. And it was a landmark because Hank, as a kid and teenager and beginning musician, would go in there to eat and flirt with the waitresses. Okay. So he had sat down at the counter, the lunch counter there, and was having a hot dog or whatever, and he was flirting with some waitress, and he wrote the lyrics to this song on a napkin. It was called "Hey Hey Good Looking," and that became a major hit for him. Right? Yeah. So that's where we're going to have this meeting. So they got me a rental car, took me back to the hotel, and said, "Okay, we've had, we're going to have Jeff come down here. We're going to get the cameras all set up, and we'll call you, and then you drive from the hotel here. Jeff will already be sitting in the booth when you come in. We want to film you meeting him for the first time." So, okay, everything's, that's how they do it. So I got the call. I came down in the vehicle, and I pull up in front, and there's this guy sitting on this bench with this lady. And I'm looking at him. I'm thinking, man, that's the dude. What's he doing out here? He's supposed to be inside in the booth because they told me to come on down so everything's ready, right? So I sat there for a minute thinking, well, maybe he's going to get up and go in, and I'll wait, and then I'll walk in, and they catch that moment. Well, he didn't get up. So I got out of the vehicle, and I walked over to him. And by this time, I realized, this is definitely him, no question about it. So, because I recognize the face. Sure. And I said, "Hi." I said, "Are you Jeff Schoep?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "I'm Daryl Davis." Put my hand out. We shook hands, and he introduced me to his friend. And we chatted for a moment and said, I guess we better go in. And so we walk in, and the camera people, their mouths just drop because they got the cameras focused on the booth or whatever. And here we come walking in the door together. And so we went ahead and sat down and got into the conversation. And to be honest with you, it was very organic, and that part is real. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He was a real person. We all can have preconceived notions about what somebody looks like just by listening to them on the phone. We can't see them. We call some company and make an appointment or whatever. Sure. And, you hear this voice. Okay, well, it's probably an older person because the voice is cracking, or it's a smoker because the voice is raspy, or it's a Black person because of this heavy accent, or it's a white person from England, whatever. Yep. And then once you determine, the race of this person or whatever, then you try to figure out what they look like. And half the time when you meet them, they don't look a thing like it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we're always forming perceptions. And so what I knew about Jeff and what I'd seen about Jeff was this dangerous neo-Nazi leader.
Mm-hmm.
And this is who I'm going to, interview for this film. So I see the guy sitting there and I think, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself to him just like anybody else. I could have just bypassed him and gone on into the restaurant, and let the producer and director deal with it. But he's sitting right there. I'm not going to just walk by him and not say anything.
Right.
So that's what I did. And I think, that organic thing and how our meeting transpired without anybody directing us and this, that, and the other, it was the most beautiful thing in the world. He was a normal person. He did not fit, what I thought he was going to fit, jump up and start yelling and screaming at me or whatever else,
Sure.
that I see on TV. And I probably didn't fit, what he felt. But we got into the diner. We sat down opposite each other. We started talking just casual. So, how was your trip down, whatever. What got you into the movement? He went into the history with his grandfather and all this. He was fascinated by this, that, and the other. And, we exchanged a few things about some of my history. And I told him, my first experience with racism, where I was 10 years old and people threw things at me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, we were getting along just fine. And then he said, it wasn't so much a racist organization. He said, that they're standing up for the rights of white people. And I said, okay, I believe everybody should be equal. And he goes, well, you all have your black leaders and your black organization. You have Martin Luther King and you have the NAACP. And I said, yeah, but there are also white members in the NAACP. May I join the NSM? No.
Yeah, that.
So, and so then we got out, okay, well, how are we going to work together? How are we going to get this in? We got white members in our black groups, to advance this or whatever to help us. Why can't I join the NSM? And, we went back and forth on that. And then we started talking, so then I changed the subject. I said, so what kind of music do you like, Jeff? He says, rock music. And I said, okay, well, rock music was invented by black people. Oh, so, what difference does it make? Good music is good music, right? And I said, okay, well, tell me who invented rock and roll? He said, well, Elvis. I said, come on, man. I know you know better than that, right? So we talked about that. We laughed and joked about that. And then I tested him. He goes, I like, black people invented this, black people invented that. And he said, well, a black man invented peanut butter too. And I said, okay. I said, who was it? And he named him. Charles Drew. I mean, who was it? No, George Washington Carver.
Washington Carver.
I was thinking about with the blood transfusion. Yeah, George Washington Carver. And I was like, whoa, this guy does know something, And so, we got talking some more. And then it was going so well, he had to shift gears, because he had to get back into that, neo-Nazi mode.
Yep.
And that's when he started talking about, I will fight to the last bullet for my people and so on. I'm like, oh, okay, this is the guy.
Yeah, that's the guy I remember from the show. So this is where this becomes so fascinating for me, and I know that the listeners will get this too, is because I mean, how fitting that the thing was called Accidental Courtesy, because here you are, Jeff, like you said, you start this conversation, you guys are having this great conversation. It's really all organic, as Daryl says, and accidentally you guys are getting along when the whole idea of this, certainly on your part, Jeff, is the idea that I'm going to hate this guy and I got to show the world how much I hate this guy. And now all of a sudden you have to step out of what was happening naturally in that natural and beautiful organic conversation. you have to step out of what's happening naturally to go back into this radical mindset. So, the whole idea of accidental courtesy. I mean, I like the title, and it's so fitting for. I mean, it's almost like fate that this is the way that this thing started. So then, Jeff, let's kind of get into the part where, and if you can, step back, and obviously this is a monumental time in your life. So get back to the time where, first of all, you've got to make this transition, right? You've got to get back into where you need to be for the people who are depending on you, right? Anybody who's in a leadership role either is conscious or has to get themselves to a point of consciousness that there are people that are depending on me for what I'm doing right in this moment. So in that moment, you've got Daryl Davis sitting in front of you. You realize, you come to the conscious realization that I am not supposed to be getting along with this guy. What is that like? And how did that play out?
It was difficult because, like I said, it was almost like, and I think it does have something to do with fate, because the fact that I didn't do background checks or check into this, and then all of a sudden, oops, there he is, like it was mind blowing. So as Daryl said, the conversation was so organic. It was almost like the cameras weren't there. So I had to draw myself back into that and be like, hey, you're here for a purpose. You're here to promote the National Socialist movement. That's what I was doing, and get back into that mindset. And that's when I, switched gears and went into that more, aggressive conversation. And what was so fascinating about it is typically in arguments, discussions, it wasn't really an argument, but I was making bold statements, or aggressive statements. And usually when you do that, in my experience for years and years and years, the other individual will push back, will show a reaction, will make some kind of reaction or get angry too, be ready to push back. It's almost kind of a natural thing when you're in that situation. Like if somebody comes up and is yelling in your face or whatever, which we weren't yelling, but I did change my tone and was aggressive. And Daryl's persona, his demeanor did not change one bit. And this is something, that I've learned since, that Daryl's an expert at this. He's very, very good at it. And this is really important for fostering dialogue, civil discourse, all that. And I've learned so much from him from that, because I tell you what, at that moment when he didn't react, his face stayed the same and he just continued the conversation. Like I didn't even say anything aggressive or offensive or anything like that. He was just like, okay, and just continued the conversation. I didn't know what, at that point, I was like totally intrigued. Like I was like, how is this guy not reacting? How is that possible? Because I hadn't really experienced that before. So now I'm intrigued. I'm more interested in talking with him, and that's just how Daryl is. That's who he is as a person. It wasn't an act or anything like that. It was real, and people can sense real. When you're sitting with somebody, you can sense sincerity. At least I try to read people. All those years being involved in the movement, you had to read people. If you didn't read people, you'd be in a lot of trouble, because you could get hurt, you could go to jail, you could have a whole multitude of things. So I'm trying to read him, and I'm like, boy, this is really a different experience for me. So and the whole way back after that too, with my girl, I was like, this guy's really interesting. I don't know how to, I wasn't wrapping my mind around it completely at the time. It took time to process. But it was really intriguing to me and interesting that he didn't react. And I think that shifted the tone of the conversation, because now he's not reacting. He's not in a negative way. He's just continuing the conversation where we left off. And to me, that was really interesting.
And if it had gone the way that the producer and director had wanted it to go, I'm not saying they wanted us to have fisticuffs or anything like that, but they wanted to catch our first meeting and then get right into this interview. Like Jeff pointed out, he knew nothing about my background or anything about me. He knew who I was or something like that. I'd never met him before. I knew his background, but we'd never communicated, prior to this. So he's there to defend the National Socialist movement. I'm there to say, how can you hate me? We don't even know me. So already I have a position of, this man does not like me. Well, how do I know that? Well, number one, he belongs to a neo-Nazi organization. They don't like blacks and they don't like Jews. So, and whatever else, right? So, and I fit one of those categories. So already my perception becomes my reality. He's a neo-Nazi. I perceive he doesn't like me, even though I don't know him. All right. And he's there to be interviewed by this guy who gets people out of the movement. He's trying to get people into the movement. Right. So he already has something against me, right?
Yep.
So let's see where this goes. But unfortunately, fate intervened. We met each other on common ground, just sitting outside on a bench, and we hit it off and went on in there and did our thing. So it could have gone a little differently. I mean, I still would have been me. He still would have been him. But because we had that pre-exposure to one another on a human level.
Yep.
Right? That humanity came through.
That's what I was going to say. The humanity took over.
That shifted the direction, unbeknownst to the producer and the director.
Yeah. No, and that's a fascinating thing. And I love the fact. So this is obviously something that both you and you, Daryl, and I have talked about. You, Jeff, and I have talked about is how important the conversation itself is, right? Because one of the things that bugs me so much about so much of the stuff that we encounter in the different things that we do, the three of us, in our separate circles and also in our common circles, is the fact that we are so polarized because so often the conversation does not happen. People are unwilling to recognize that there is a common humanity in all of us, even though we can differ greatly on so many things, whether it be the color of our skin or the ideology or the people that we idolized as we were growing up, or the information or misinformation that we have been presented with. So often the conversation doesn't happen. And like you recently said, you said in quite often in tweets and different things that you've written and said, Daryl, is when the conversation stops, the hate, exacerbates or begins, or we've all said it in different ways, but right. that conversation and the fact that you guys were I like that idea. The humanity took over. We met each other. We had this conversation, and then look what that did with you, Jeff. Because, like you said, it took time to process. It made you think. If that would have just turned into a shouting match in that diner that day, that could have easily just been another. Aggressive argument with a black guy, and it just reaffirms my feelings about black people and this and that, and then you wouldn't have thought twice about it because it's just another one of those things that happened in your past over and over and over again, but it wasn't. It was something entirely different. And Jeff, that's something that you and I talked about. I don't know if it was last year or whatever, but we're seeing it a lot again this week. At the time of this recording, this beginning of May right now, at the time of this recording, there's all these demonstrations and they protests, and then you've got different white supremacists or Nazi movements marching around, waving their flags, doing their thing. But Jeff, you talked about the idea of playing for a reaction, right? And that's what you were doing that day again in front of the camera with Daryl, is playing for a reaction. But the same thing that you and I have talked about before, the reaction is what you're going for. The people in the movement, they're going for the reaction. People that are out there waving their flags around and messing around on overpasses trying to piss people off, right? They're playing for a reaction. Daryl didn't give you that satisfaction. Daryl is there on a common humanity footing, right?
Yep.
So talk about, Okay, so now you're thinking as you're leaving this this conversation, it didn't turn into the confrontation that you thought it might be, or the folks behind the camera might be, but now it's got you thinking. So then, how did this was that story, Daryl, that about you and the Cub Scouts, was that part of that conversation, or did that happen different? And then how did this thing progress? I mean, obviously this conversation could go on for so long, and I know we don't have that kind of time, but
I told Jeff the Cub Scout story where people, had thrown things at me, but just in passing, just to give him an example of what I had gone through, I didn't realize, the impact that it would later have on him. I was just mentioning it in passing some of the things that I've been through, that maybe he had not been through because of the color of his skin. But, he talked about a moment ago about reading people. When you sit down with somebody, you read them, try to figure out where they're coming from, et cetera. One's perception is one's reality. And when you alter somebody's perception and they resonate with it, it changes their reality. Because they're wondering, well, this guy is not fitting what I thought he was supposed to be, that kind of thing, right? So, for example, let's say, Wilk, if I invite you over to my house and I say, it's the third house on the right, come to the street, there'll probably be a little lap poodle in the yard running around. You're going to pull your car into my driveway and walk across my yard and pet my poodle and knock on the door. Well, if I tell you, it's the third house on the right or whatever, and then, there's a pit bull running around my yard, you might be like, well, I'll call you when I get there.
Right.
You bring the pit bull inside because, you might have a different perception of what a pit bull might be, right? But there are some very friendly pit bulls, They have a bad rep, actually. So now I'm going to tell you a funny story that even Jeff doesn't know, but it involves him, and it involves my false perception of something, right? So I was in his hometown, and at one point, and he had invited me over to his house. And so, this is after, he got out and we were getting together and all that kind of stuff. This is like our first time getting together since he had left the movement. And so he invited me over to his house, and I went over there, and he had a German Shepherd or two. And I'm thinking, I like German Shepherds, but some of them can be very mean. I'm thinking, well, is this German Shepherd in the movement? That's what I'm thinking.
Right. Yeah. What is this? What is this dog been trained
I don't know, man. Has this dude trained the dog to hate black people? Maybe Jeff got out, but did the German Shepherd get out of the movement?
Right.
So, but and dogs, they read people too very well.
Yes, they absolutely do.
They sense, if you're friendly, if you fear them, if you're going to do something, they know. And I just treated the dog like anything else. I sat in his living room, pet the dog, and that was that, So, I had misjudged the dog.
Sure. Makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. And that is a very good point. I mean, perception being reality is something that I've talked about plenty of times too, because what we've built up in our mind often takes over reality. Right. And then we, just like, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but it's the ugly part of us as human beings is because we start to seek out points of affirmation. You use the dog example, right? When we hear a story about, or we get this preconceived notion about a particular type of dog, whether it's pit bulls or Dobermans or German Shepherds. I mean, you can name throughout history whichever ones you want, but it's not, we don't notice anymore the stories about the beautiful and loving example of this dog that saved the child in this particular circumstance, or the beautiful story about how this lifelong companion German Shepherd was the last loving companion of this particular whatever. We don't recognize and we don't embrace those stories anymore. What we do embrace is the story on the news where all of a sudden we hear, oh, pit bull, eats the owner or whatever, and that becomes our reality. The same ugliness happens, with whether it be, the stories of the things that are happening today with all the anti-Semitism and right now the big angst in our country, or the angst of the day, the angst du jour, if you will, right, is the the Palestinians and the Israel conflict going on, and people have decided one way or the other, that I'm on this side or I'm on this side, and everybody else that it doesn't agree with me is in that them category. They're only listening to the points that affirm their own beliefs. And one of the things that I love about the story between you two, Jeff and Daryl, is the fact that this conversation did start out on a humanity footing. There was some pushback, Jeff, on your part. I mean, I know Daryl, and this was something that Daryl had been doing for a long time, but there was an internal conflict, I know, for you, Jeff, because this is a conversation that you and I have had. But that internal conflict, based on your preconceived notions of who Daryl, was, and just who Black people were in general, and things like that. But the beautiful thing is the conversation happened, and it all starts with that conversation. But as Daryl, you say so often, when the conversation stop, or if the conversation doesn't happen in the first place, that's where that hate begins. Because,
well, what I say is, when two enemies are talking, they're not fighting.
There you go.
They're talking. Yep. They might be raising their voice and disagreeing, but at least they're talking. They're communicating. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's when the conversation ceases that the ground becomes fertile for violence.
That's right.
So you want to keep the conversation going. And to the point, Jeff knew a lot of facts about Black people. Mm-hmm. Like George Washington Carver or whoever else. But sometimes facts don't change people. Mm-hmm. What changes people are relationships.
Beautiful.
And that's what happened here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that is right. So Jeff, talk a little bit more about this transition for you, and how the conversation continued. Not that conversation that day, obviously, but what was the next move for you? And this obviously wasn't an overnight process, but it was a step-by-step process. And that's another thing that I want you to talk about is, the whole idea of that we live in today, this society of instant gratification. And people might think, well, this one conversation, if I can't do it in one conversation, it's not worth my time. Or if I can't do it in one sitting, I'm just not going to get involved. This person's not worth talking to. Talk about how this overall thing, I mean, by rights, you're one of the leading figures right now in de-radicalization, but it didn't happen overnight. So talk to me, about these steps.
Well, it's a process, and for everybody it's different. For some people it takes years and years and years. For others it's much quicker. You can't put a timestamp on it and say, well, it takes this long to de-radicalize. But the process for me was going through that conversation with Daryl, I feel like that planted some serious seeds. It had me questioning things, and it was specifically, like him sharing that deeply personal story. That's showing vulnerability, and in the movement, you didn't show vulnerability for nothing. Mm-hmm, I mean, mm-hmm. You just didn't do it. You put yourself at risk if you did that, if you showed vulnerabilities. So sitting down across from somebody that's a perceived enemy in this case, or not necessarily enemy, but adversary, I guess you could say, or sure, someone on a different wavelength of thinking. And then to have them share something like that with you, it takes the tone to a different level. It takes things to somewhere else where you're unexpected. You didn't expect that. It was, and that caused me to think. It caused me to think a lot. And, I would love to say, right then and there that I snapped my fingers and quit and dropped out. But I mean, I was embedded in this stuff for 27 years. So it took time. It took time to process and go through that. And then, you come up with all these excuses and all these reasons to stay. Like I was, the last few years that I was involved in the movement, I was every time I talk to the press or the public or anything like that, even I think on the website, I was saying this is a white civil rights organization. I was trying to put lipstick on a pig, trying to dress the Nazi party up, make it look pretty, and say that it was something, that it wasn't, that it could never be. It couldn't be that. But in my mind at the time, that was me making sense of it. So you can see the de-radicalization process going during those last few years that I was involved in it, because I was trying to make sense of it. And, when you talk about de-radicalization, disengagement, all that, my story and my version of how it took place, mine was exactly backwards of the way it should be, because I was embedded in that life and going through the de-radicalization process while I was still involved. Typically, and in the work that we do, we want people to disengage and then work on the de-radicalization part. That's the more proper method, and that tends to work a lot better. But in my case, it wasn't that way. And if somebody would have told me during those last few years, hey, you're de-radicalizing, that would have been fighting words. I wouldn't have agreed with it. I wouldn't have seen it. So.
But go ahead. But for somebody like Jeff, though, see, for him, he did it the right way. Okay. For other people, yeah, I would agree what he's saying. Disengage them and then work on their mentality and attitude about it.
Sure.
The derad part, right? But he rose to the top. He came in as just a rank and file member into the organization, and he climbed the ladder to the top. He scrutinized everything. Okay. And he had a very, cohesive, group. Sure, there was, there's always going to be infighting. Somebody's trying to stab you in the back, but for somebody to stay in power over the same group for 25 out of 27 years of his existence in that group says he crossed his T's and dotted his I's and made sure everything was okay. So in getting out, he did the right thing. He tried to resist. He looked for reasons why, he shouldn't get out, and this, that, and the other, because he's got this whole cadre of people that follow him and that depend on him, as you pointed out. And so he's looking for every excuse, put the lipstick on the pig or whatever, so forth and so on. And we're a white civil rights organization. We changed the swastika. He did everything that made sense for him in his mind to try to stay in. But as he looked at it, it wasn't making any sense.
Right.
Right. So, if he had just gotten out and then, he might have thought, well, maybe I didn't try this or try that. It's good that he tried all these things and saw it doesn't work.
Well, right. And that's a true testament to the kind of person that you are, Jeff, is the best way that we as leaders, do anything, whether it be for ourselves or the people that follow us or the people that depend on us or anything else, we have to do our due diligence in everything that we're doing. Right. Otherwise, we're just, a disingenuous placeholder in something. Right. Whether it be business or this organization or the church that we belong to or whatever. But just like we look at our in my case, Christian faith, it's we believe. And if we just blind faith, believe without ever questioning anything, do we really believe, or are we just some kind of automaton that's just, killing time and wasting space and oxygen, right? So I believe, again, kind of like Daryl says, for you, this is the right way because of the figurehead in this organization, the way that you did things. If you would have just, turned on a dime and then all of a sudden, what do you really genuinely believe in yourself at the end of the day that you did the right thing and really believe? I mean, it's no accident, Jeff, that you now are one of the leading figures in the de-radicalization movement. But you wouldn't be where you are in that if you had just blindly flipped and basically said, no, I was just faking it the whole time before. I'm good now. I'm all set. Right. And
right.
So yeah, this, I mean, it's fascinating, but when I think about this, and I think about where you are today, Jeff, and in the work that you're doing, and then Daryl, the work that you continue to do, and the difference that both of you make in the lives of, who knows, thousands, maybe even millions at the end of the day. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, Daryl, I know that you've personally, played a hand in walking hundreds out of these, hate movements, but the far-reaching effects of what you do and what you have done has been, just exponential. I mean, just look at Jeff as a prime example, and that's just one of the people.
Take Jeff, for example, shortly after he got out, and there were other people also who influenced or inspired Jeff. After me, there's a beautiful Muslim lady, filmmaker named Dia Khan, who also planted seeds and helped water, the seeds that have been planted already so that they would bloom. So all due credit to her as well. But when Jeff got out, I invited him, to go on a lecture with me, and he accepted, and we went and did some stuff, and it made some press. We did some other things together, and then guess what? I get an email from some guy I don't know who is in Jeff's group, and he saw the interviews or whatever, and he contacted me. He said, how did you do that? Because I'm in there, and he didn't know Jeff very well, but he knew him. He was his leader, but he was from another state. And he said, did he really, really get out? I said, yeah, And so I put them in contact, and now this guy is out.
Nice. And
he's doing very well. His life has improved.
Nice. I love it.
So, as you point out, it can be exponential. You may or may not know about the people who get affected by your actions.
It's like a ripple effect. There's so many ripples that when I left, there was the organization, at the time it was the largest of its kind in the country. Now it's I don't even know what it is, but a lot of people say it's barely hanging by a thread. So that says a lot, and there was a lot of people that walked away. For every person that walks away, that can create a ripple effect into the lives of others, because they'll see, well, he did it or she did it, I can do that too. And I've heard that so many, and I'm sure, Daryl, you've been hearing it for years and years and years. You've seen it. It causes this ripple effect, or this snowball effect, where so many other people can be affected by it. And it's life altering. It's really amazing to see. And it feels good to take part in it.
Oh, it's absolutely a beautiful thing. I mean, yeah, the ripples from the work that you guys have done. I mean, it's just like I talk about, right? It's the bettering the world one attitude at a time. I mean, we each of us have to start with ourselves. Ultimately, it really comes down to each of us starting with ourselves. But, like I think it was Gandhi, right? Be the change that you want to see in the world, and then see what happens once you start to change. Once you start to change, the world around you begins to change, and who knows what happens after that. Just like a ripple starts with one small pebble, but who knows what that ripple looks like by the time it gets to the other side of the pond. I mean, this is such a beautiful thing, and this particular story of yours. And obviously, Jeff, yeah, I know there's been several people instrumental in your overall change, but the genesis obviously being Daryl Davis. Such a beautiful story. So let's talk real quick. I know we're getting close to the end of our time. We only got a few minutes together. Daryl, I know you are working with our friends at the Pro-Human Foundation, and then obviously still playing, doing the boogie woogie rock and roll and blues on the keyboard, right? So that's a beautiful thing. Talk real quick about the Pro-Human Foundation, and then obviously people can find out more about the Pro-Human Foundation in the show notes for this episode and go back to the previous episode. Talk about that, and then we'll talk a little bit about what you've got going on, Jeff.
Sure. Well, I am on the board of directors and a co-founder of the Pro-Human Foundation, which was founded by a fellow named Brian Bartning. Mm-hmm. And, we figure that we don't need to be anti everything. We're not anti-racist.
Mm-hmm.
We're not, racist as in a noun, the person. We're not anti the person. We're anti the person's ideology. So anti-racism, not anti-racist the person. The person can change.
Mm-hmm.
The ideology will always be out there somewhere, right? So what can be learned can be unlearned. So rather than go around talking about what we're against, I'm against this, I'm against that, I'm against this, let's talk about what we're for and work towards that. So therefore you have the Pro-Human Foundation, which can be found at prohuman.org.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And Jeff Schoep, I know you are, you're doing all kinds of stuff. I know you're all over the place now. Simon Wiesenthal Center, right? Obviously Beyond Barriers USA. Tell people what you've got going on and what the best way that, they can find your work.
So, it's the Office of Juvenile Justice Department that I've been doing some stuff with. What we're doing there is a curriculum has been put out that I'm one of the educators that's delivering the curriculum. One of the first educators in the country that's bringing this curriculum out, and so I'm going to high schools, and it's an anti-bullying campaign. So it brings people together. Nice. It targets not so youth are not bullying each other and using racism and things of that nature. So it's a very positive thing, and we're seeing it. The first group of educators we're putting it out across the country right now, and hopefully it's something that later ends up going into all the different schools. It's because we're getting feedback from the students and things like that on how well it's set with them, and it's really an incredible program. So I'm truly honored to be part of that, and in a way it's surreal. Someone like myself coming from the background that I came from, now
mm-hmm.
doing this work with the Office of Juvenile Justice and the Justice Department. It's you have to pinch myself once in a while and check to see if it's real.
Right.
So
right.
That's pretty incredible. And then working with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, of course, they're doing amazing things with the combat hate programs in schools. So, I've been in different parts of the country, delivering some talks as part, as a follow up to that program, and doing community talks with them as well. And I've also been doing a little bit of work with Wiesenthal and also Beyond Barriers in meeting with people, helping people get out of extremism, of course, the usual work that we do.
Nice.
And I've had the government reaching out and put me in touch with a few people as well to talk with them. And we've had a lot of good success with it, because a couple of the younger people actually have specifically asked for me, where they say, well, is there anybody that you'll talk to? Because they feel like they're at this dead end. And some of them say they're curious about how I was able
Sure.
to do it. So they're like, man, we will talk to him, mostly because they're curious. And a lot of times that can facilitate that conversation as well, because if they see, well, somebody like that was the real deal, that was involved all those years, was able to do it, why can't I do it too? And that's been a really common theme there as well. So
Absolutely right. No, that's your beautiful example of what can be done when a person opens up their mind, opens up their heart to the idea that it doesn't have to be this way, and all of us know from the work that we've done that hate gets us nowhere. It's a dead end road. It's an ugly way to live. And it produces nothing beautiful. And if we want to live in a beautiful world, we got to stamp out the hate, derate the hate. Jeff Schoep, Daryl Davis, you guys are awesome, and honored to have you as friends and returning guests here on the De-Rate the Hate podcast. Anybody who wants to learn more about these two can check out the past episodes where they've been on the De-Rate the Hate podcast. Check out the show notes, find out different ways to contact them. Yeah, thank you, gentlemen. It's been incredible as always, and I look forward to many more conversations with both of you.
As do we, and thank you very much for having us on here, especially in a time like this where people are tending to be silent on things. Presidents of colleges getting fired and resigning, and protests, and here we are talking about this,
right,
and solving these problems and showing people how to do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So thank you, because without people like you giving us that platform out of fear of protest or retaliation or whatever, what good is our work doing?
That's right.
Well stated. It's been an honor. It's been truly an honor, and keep up the amazing work you're doing, Wilk. And we're truly honored to be on the program again.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the De-Rate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week, saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.